We'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Jamie Altman joining us. All right, continuing on the Ferguson coverage, I want to bring in Congressman Peter King, a Republican from New York. Congressman, it is good to see you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much for joining us. You issued a statement last night calling for peace. What steps do we need to take as a country to ensure peace and that this won't happen again?
Well, I did more than call for peace. What I said was I thought it was terrible what happened over the last 4 months, the way this narrative was put out there by our national leaders and by many in the media, presuming that the police officer was guilty. And I think if we are going to have peace, then I think it's important for both sides to be honest here. I think it would be very helpful if President Obama went and met with the police officer or invited him to the White House. Said, you've gone through 4 months of smear and slander, and the least we can do is tell you that it's unfortunate that it happened, and thank you for doing your job. And then try to bring the communities together, but doing it in an honest way, not start off with the presumption that the cops are guilty. The cops are out there attempting to kill African Americans. I mean, there's this moral equivalency was set up between Michael Brown and the police officer, Darren Wilson. You know, there was none. Michael Brown certainly did not deserve to die, but the fact is he had just robbed a convenience store, he had beaten up the owner of the place, and yet his version, or the narrative on his side, was being accepted over the police officer who had an unblemished record and had never fired his weapon before.
You're absolutely right. And I think one of the reasons that the president came out last night was to quiet those people who said, you're actually putting fuel on the fire. So he comes out and he tries to calm the country down. But what he said, I don't know, what's your observation of what the president said last night?
I thought it was lackluster, to be honest with you. I wasn't sure what point he was trying to make.
You wanted him to come out, but then he didn't say much.
No, he really didn't. And he seemed, again, I wish he had said one good word about the police. It's one good word about Officer Wilson, who had gone through all this. And obviously, everyone feels for the Brown family. To lose a child is horrible under any circumstances. But in this case, somehow, again, there's this equivalency that's out there that the country itself is torn apart. The president is suggesting, and the implication is that somehow the police are brutalizing African Americans. And, you know, I think it's time for both sides to be honest. There should be a little more honesty coming from the African American community, too, as to what their obligations are.
You're absolutely right.
And also, when are we going to stop listening to Al Sharpton? That's another thing. Since when does he become the moral arbiter of who's right and who's wrong?
Well, I mean, that he definitely, obviously, has been fueling this fire for a long time now. But let's talk about Al Sharpton. And by the way, New York. Okay, so last night you have Commissioner Bratton walking around Times Square. He's got all of these bodyguards. And what happens? Somebody throws red paint on his face to make it look like he's all bloody. There he is in the middle with a stoic face walking out with red paint on his face as if it's blood. How are we going to stop this kind of activity?
I think, first of all, we do it by defending the police, by stop suggesting there's a moral equivalency here, by stop saying, you know, people like Mayor de Blasio, who their implication is that the police are wrong, that somehow it's the police who are responsible for the hostility in the community. How about talking about the thousands of young African-American lives who have been saved by the activities of the police over the last 20 years? And also, how about giving credit to those African-Americans in the went before the grand jury in Ferguson to sustain, the police officer's version of the story. So rather than, dividing people away, I think too many people are, especially Al Sharpton and his and types like him, who just love to agitate and start trouble. Let's start looking for the good people on both sides.
Very, very divisive, and the divisiveness just divides people to the extent that it doesn't help anyone. It's actually hurting the entire community. Let me switch gears, ask you a little about the economy, because the consumer confidence number came out. It was much lower than expected at 88.7. People were looking for a level of 96. Clearly, we are looking at a public that doesn't have a lot of confidence. Now, here we are going into a new year, new Congress. What do you think can get done?
We have to get something done. First of all, we have to get these tax extenders done at the end of the year and get that. We have to, I think, try to adopt a spending bill now that goes through next September 30th. What we should spend all of next year doing, or the first 3 or 4 months of next year, is working on the next year's fiscal year budget, and start showing real cuts, do it in a responsible way so that Congress goes forward with its proposals, the president pushes back, and we come up with some sort of compromise. We have to obviously reduce the rate of spending growth. We have to, I believe, again, give more targeted tax cuts to small businesses and to middle-income people. And also with Obamacare, I think the more we can start pulling back on Obamacare, the more pressure we're going to be taking off businesses.
Well, the tax reform package is something that a lot of people want. Certainly that would move the needle in terms of economic activity. And yet the president while he said he is willing to cut corporate taxes, he does want to cut individual taxes. And that means small business is going to be faced with higher taxes than large businesses.
Especially in subchapter S corporations. And again, here's the deal, too, though. We have Paul Ryan who's going to be chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. No one has better expertise and knowledge of the entire budget and the economy in Congress than Paul Ryan. If we go forward, follow Paul Ryan's direction here, the president's going to be put in an awkward spot. He just can't, veto it. He just can't rebuke it. He's going to have to come at least halfway, I think, because we can make a very coherent case, which is why I don't want to be involved next January, February, or March, lurching from month to month, worrying about a government shutdown. Let's go forward with our agenda, led by a guy like Paul Ryan, who I think can really provide tremendous leadership.
Absolutely. The credibility there is obvious to everybody. Let me ask you about the tax extended package that you just mentioned. Do you think that you're going to be able to extend that?
Yeah, I think so.
Business wants it. Randall Stevenson, CEO of AT&T, told me just last week that tax extender package, nobody knows where it is, and that's why he has slowed down spending, and business in general has stopped investing.
I know that Dave Camp, who is the outgoing chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, certainly wants to have the tax extender package go through. My only concern is that with all the fighting going on about the president's executive order on immigration, that could just bog us down over the next few weeks, and we won't get done what we have to get done. But that tax extender package is very, very important.
All right, final word on the immigration executive order. What's the GOP response?
I think we should not even talk about closing down the government. We should start targeting in January every item we can of the president and block it, whether it's appointees, whether it's particular funding he needs. Block that, but do it next year in January, not get bogged down in the government shutdown now.
Congressman, it's great to have you on the show.
Maria, thank you.
I know you're in town for Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you.